Question is, what happened to you three? Did you not hear that I was teaching this morning? For those who are at home, there are a few more than three people here, but we're really short crowd today. So for the last X weeks, folks have been talking about the birth of Christ. Well, today we're going to drop back between 700 and 735 years before the birth of Christ, and we're going to look at the book of Micah. You know, they say the best place to start is at the beginning, so let's do that. Let's go to Micah chapter 1, verse 1. The word of the Lord that came to Micah, a Meresheth, in the days of Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, which he saw concerning Samaria and Jerusalem. So Micah is a shortened form of Micaiah, and it means who is like the Lord. He was born in Moresheth, or Moresheth, Gaza, as I mentioned in other places. It's on the border of Philistia, about 25 miles southwest of Jerusalem. And he prophesied to the tribe of Judah and also to Israel, but he spoke in the land of Judah to those people. If there's any question about what his message was about or who it came from, the answer is in Micah 3, verse 8. But truly I am full of power by the Spirit of the Lord, and of justice and might, to declare to Jacob his transgression and to Israel his sin. Now, we don't know any more about Micah other than where he lived. If the Lord thought it was important, he would have told us. Folks have speculated that he may have been a farmer or a shepherd, just based on the place he lived, but there's nothing else that we're told. As far as the kings that he lived during the time, Jotham was considered a good king, and basically for Judah it was a time of luxury. Ahaz, not so good, and he paid tribute to the Assyrians, and when his son Hezekiah came along, also considered a good king, Hezekiah continued to pay tribute. And I know you've heard at least twice, but probably more than that in the last couple of weeks, because I mentioned it, that it was during the time of Hezekiah that he sort of woke up and prayed to God, and that's when the 185,000 Assyrians were killed overnight. I think it's interesting that Micah and Isaiah are common contemporaries. I kind of like to see how these guys all fit together at one time. And Isaiah basically spoke in Jerusalem, while Micah was in the rural areas. Isaiah talked about national problems and troubles with the kings, while Micah talked about the rights of the common people. And he supported the poor and the downtrodden. And I think you can see this as we start going through the book at some of the different kinds of evildoers he mentioned. In Micah 2, verses 1 and 2, we look at the land grabbers. Woe to those who devise iniquity and who work out evil on their beds. At the morning light they practice it, because it is the power of their hand. They covet fields and take them by violence, also houses, and seize them. And they oppress a man and his house, a man and his inheritance. Now, if you listen to the news today, and probably rightfully so, the young people are screaming that they can't afford to buy a home. And that's got many reasons. But historically, folks owned homes, but that may be all they had. So think about it. Here you've got a king, and he's trying to take what you've got. Or somebody that's got a little bit of money, and he's trying to take from you maybe the only thing you've got. I don't see where anybody could consider that good. Rulers that loved evil. Micah 3, first 4 verses. And I said, hear now, O heads of Jacob, and you rulers of the house of Israel, it is not for you to know justice. You who hate good and love evil, who strip the skin of my people and the flesh from their bones, who also eat the flesh of my people, flay their skin about them, break their bones, and chop them to pieces like meat for the pot, like flesh in the cauldron, that they may cry to the Lord, but he will not hear them. He will even hide his face from them at the time, because they have been evil in their deeds. I guess you could take this as literal. Be pretty rough, but possible that it would go this far. But if you go all the way back to the book of Samuel, if you remember, Samuel was one of the last pre-king leaders of Israel. And when the people of Israel asked for a king, he threw a fit. And I don't think there's any other way to say it. He blasted the people for wanting a king when they had a king already in God. But part of his message was, be careful what you ask for. Because he goes ahead and he tells them of what a king is going to do for them, how they were going to have to give so much for kings, how they were going to be taxed so heavily. And that really came to a head during the time of Solomon, and was one of the reasons that the kingdom was divided, is because Solomon had everything he wanted, and where did he get it? Well, certainly from God, without a doubt, because God blessed him in many ways, but he also took of the people, and his taxes were extremely hard. So whether you see that this is really a physical thing, that beating the people down, or whether you just say that they were taxed to death, or whether they were taken for servants, however you look at it, it's not a good thing. And it's really abuse of power is what it boils down to. Those that take pay inappropriately, they know how better to word this. Micah 3, verse 11. Her heads judge for a bribe. Her priests teach for pay, and her prophets divine for money. Yet they lean upon the Lord and say, is not the Lord among us? No harm can come among us. You have a skill, and somebody has a need. What should you do? Would it be right to charge a brother?
It depends, Rick. I mean, you should be willing to volunteer your time to help the brethren. But on the reverse of that, if you're the receiver of that, you should be willing to acknowledge value if it's a skilled trade, especially. I don't expect somebody to come over and wire my house that requires licensing in the skilled trade, not say, well, you should just do this for me because we're in the church. I don't think that's right. But I think this is a little dumber than that. I think this is offering help when you can.
I think your comment's dead on, and you said it in a few words. It depends. Charlie, go ahead. You have something to say. Let me give you an example. Got an old friend, known him for many years from Cold Harbor. His name was Joe. And for 40 years, he was an appliance repairman for Sears, which was a big deal during his days. Members of the congregation were always calling upon Joe to do favors for them, to fix things. Folks that never talked to Joe normally during worship in Bible class never even knew he existed until they had a problem. And then everybody was Joe's friend. I think that's where you said we can abuse it, right? But if anybody really needed the help If something went wrong and it was a matter of whether their house would be warm or cold, or whether they have a refrigerator to keep their food safe, Joe would have jumped in and not thought a word of it, not considered, wouldn't have charged a nickel. And I think that's where we're going, Charlie. There are times of need that Christians need to step up. We need to come to the plate, without a doubt. And that can be food when people are hungry. That could be repairing a door if the door on the house falls apart. You got to keep the cold air out. But we have to watch not to be abusive also. But the people mentioned in this, what would you expect a diviner, a prophet, would you not expect them to speak the word to all? Should they only have special for those who can afford to pay? Heads, judge for a bribe. Does anything bother you more than to read about corrupt judges and the things that they do and the things they get away with? Or politicians who say one thing and do something else, who take your tax money and spend it in ways that you would never spend for their luxury? I think that's the kind of people we're talking about here. People who have something and they abuse what they have and they take advantage of people. We don't like that. So why ever would God like that? And he clearly didn't. There are several familiar or prominent prophecies that are talked about in Micah. You may not necessarily find them prominent, I may or may not, but they come to a head. Micah 3:12. Therefore, because of you, Zion shall be plowed like a field. Jerusalem shall become heaps of ruins, and the mountain of the temple like the bare hills of the forest. What's that all about? Let's go to 2 Chronicles 36, 17 to 19. Therefore he brought against them the king of the Chaldeans, who killed their young men with the sword in the house of their sanctuary, and who had no compassion on young man or virgin, on the ages or the weak. He gave them all into his hand, and all the articles of the house of the Lord, great and small, the treasures of the house of the Lord. And we're talking about the temple here now. Get that straight. And the treasures of the king and his leaders, all these he took to Babylon. Then they burned the house of God, broke down the wall of Jerusalem, burned all its palaces with fire, and destroyed its precious possessions. That's what Micah was talking about. Now, if you say, Rick, you've used that verse before, you're absolutely right, because it's one of my favorites. You go, what? That's kind of morbid, isn't it? But what I think and why I use this particular verse, you never know who's online. And when we profess that God loves us, that is absolutely true. When we say God is love, who here would deny it? But don't push it, so to speak. That doesn't mean God loves everything. God does not love sin. And there will be a day of recompense, or days of recompense. For Judah, they were punished right here and there. The temple was destroyed, and what wasn't carried off was melted down and burned up. It was gone, everything. God's chosen people were done with and hauled off for 70 years. So when he tells you in the New Testament that there is a hell and there are consequences for your sins, should you believe him? Ask Judah when Nebuchadnezzar came in. Ask Judah what they think. God is a God of love. God is a God of righteousness, and he is a God of justice. And whatever we may think, he will get justice. Micah 5:2. But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of you shall come forth to me the one to be the ruler of Israel, whose goings forth are from of old, from everlasting. I don't think I need to tell you who or what this is about. Not today. Micah 7:6. For son dishonors father and daughter, rises against her mother, daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies are the men of his own household. Prominent verse, Rick? Kind of a bit of a head-scratcher, isn't it? Well, listen to the words of Christ. Luke 12:53. Father will be divided against son, and son against father, mother against daughter, and daughter against mother, mother-in-law against her daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. Okay, that's still clear as mud. What happens when somebody becomes a Christian in the family? For most of us, there might have been some changes made. Family may have to change the way they act around us. We may not do some of the things we used to do with family or friends. We had a good lesson on that at the invitation Wednesday night. Now, it still could be a problem even today in this country for Christians that come from a Jewish family. It might be problems for somebody who calls himself a Christian, like the Mormons, if their son or daughter or mother believes the truth. Could be an issue for the Jehovah's Witnesses, might be a problem for the really staunch Catholics. But for the most of us, except that we might expect a little different behavior from our family and how we act around family and friends, we don't see the kind of hatred that's read about here. But it still does exist for a lot of people. If you are Hindu or Muslim and you become a Christian, things just got really, really rough. Even to the point of death. And then when they just throw you out and say you're no longer a part of the family, as much as that would hurt, that's not death. But it could happen. And it has happened, and unfortunately it will happen. If you watch the news at all, you know right now there's mess going on in Nigeria, and Trump has just fired off some weapons against people who are killing folks that are identified as Christians. Whether or not they are truly God's people acting in the ways that God has told them to do, I can't tell you. But what I can tell you is they're not Muslim, and the Muslims hate them, and they are killing them. Families torn apart because somebody's a Muslim and somebody's not. Children being hauled off, just taken. Children watching their parents being murdered in front of their eyes. But we knew. Micah told us it was going to happen. Christ said it was going to happen. And you think I might not have it right? Well, let's look at Paul and Silas when they were in Thessalonica. Acts 17:6. But when they could not find them, meaning Paul and Silas, they dragged Jason and some of the brethren to the rulers of the city, crying out, "These who have turned the world upside down have come here too." We might laugh at an expression like that, turn the world upside down. The people in Thessalonica weren't joking. They didn't think it was funny. That's what the church can do. And if we do it right, the turned upside down can be a great thing for everybody involved. Everybody wins in that situation. There are no losers in the church. It's a great thing. But to those who choose not to obey, who do not want to believe, we've made a mess of stuff. And why do we have that stupid law? And why do we have to do this? And why can't we buy alcohol on Sunday? Why can't we? Why can't we? Why can't we? Why are they always making a law stopping this? Should be my choice. And some of it is just Christian influence. You look at the places that have gambling, including the lottery tickets, no good has come from any of that. But why didn't we have it for years and years and years? Because people who carried the name Christian fought against it. And that's just one simple thing. Think about how our women in this country are treated compared to women around the world. I have a son who complains, "Oh, I'm not going to be a part of that group. They won't let the women lead." Women, do you think you're mistreated? Would you really like to be a Muslim woman? We have better things in this country because while not everything was done as a Christian or God would do it, this was built on Christian principles. The church only adds good. But not everybody sees it that way. Comments?
Remember the days of the blue law? You know what that is? Sunday law, Sabbath law, Sabbath.
Are you hearing, Stephen? Sunday law, Sabbath
Sunday
laws, blue laws?
Sabbath laws, blue laws. Back in, places in the South, some of them, there were restricted sales of, when you put alcohol, cars, several commercial businesses were not allowed to be open on Sunday. And it was originally started by the Puritans to force the observance of the day of rest.
Did you hear Stephen, I hope, talking about forcing the day of rest?
I remember it in Middle Tennessee when I was growing up, and Alabama had it too. You go and you couldn't buy a car on Sunday. There were certain things you couldn't do because you were expected to be in church.
When we moved to Georgia, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go away now.
So when we moved to Georgia, a little town, 6,000 people, about the size of Dayton, they had a law. It may have been a Georgian law, I don't know, but I knew it was for that town. You could only have certain things within X number of feet of a church building. You were not going to have a bar near one of the churches in Sandersville, Georgia. You were not near a church building. Grocery stores were just outside that range. But they didn't want things to pollute this little town where there were places of worship, whether the places were true or not, but they protected the church buildings in that little town. And boy, have things changed. But if you talk to some folks that are a little bit older, I love sports. If you ever talk to me, you'll know that. But there are some who still remember the day when there were no sporting activities for the children on Sundays, because you didn't want to take them away from worship, and there were no games or practices on Wednesday, because you wanted to let them go to Bible school. Boy, have things changed. Now, there are still folk who stand up. Rick was a manager, and come Bible class time on Wednesday night, I knew two boys that were gone. One was mine and one was another deacon's son. They were gone. I play them till the last minute. Time to get to Bible class, go. And I wasn't the only one for sure. Lots of stories like that. People did recognize what the church did and what good it brought. Micah 4, 1-5. Please hold on with me. Now it shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established on the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and the peoples shall flow to it. Many nations shall come and say, Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, and we shall walk in his paths. For out of Zion the law shall go forth, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He shall judge between many peoples, and rebuke strong nations afar off. They shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. But everyone shall sit under his own vine, under his own fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid, for the mouth of the Lord of the host has spoken. For all people each walk in the name of his God, but we will walk in the name of the Lord our God forever and ever. Anything in that remind you of something? It's forecasting the coming of the church. You see Christ here, right? You could not see Christ when I read this. But you also see the church. Where did the church start? Where was the first sermon? In Jerusalem. Where did the word go out from? Jerusalem. But this is not solely about the day of Pentecost and that first sermon. What do you think about the spears and the plowshares and all that? What's that got to do with anything? The hatred between the Gentiles and the Jews would be broken down. There would come a day, and it has already come, where God called every man together. Where people who were nothing alike, who before wouldn't even maybe spit at each other, they didn't like each other so much. So different. And now they're brothers and sisters in the greatest family ever known. That's what this is talking about. It's talking about Christ and the church. For all the bad things that Micah is going to talk about and how everything's going to be destroyed and it's going to be just a terrible mess. God's at it again. He's done it again. He put hope in the middle of all the bad stuff. He's told you there will be a time where things will be good again. Is it literal? Not all of it. Do we still fight? Do we still have wars? But those things don't come from God. Those things come from men, we're told. But think about what we have in the church. What folks outside the church are missing. What they don't understand. Because in part, we haven't done our job to teach them. The hope that we have that others might not see. What a shame. Comments? So, I've rambled on for 30 minutes. Would you like to get to the lesson text? Let's go to Micah chapter 6, which is the lesson you studied this week, and we'll look at the first 5 verses. Hear now what the Lord says. Arise, plead your case before the mountains, and let the hills hear your voice. Hear, O you mountains, the Lord's complaint, and you strong foundations of the earth. For the Lord has a complaint against his people, and he will contend with Israel. O my people, what have I done to you? And how have I wearied you? Testify against me, for I brought you up from out of the land of Egypt. I redeemed you from the house of bondage, and I sent before you Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. O my people, remember what Balak, king of Moab, canceled? And what did Balaam, the son of Beor, answer him? From Achaia Grove to Gilgal, that you may know the righteousness of the Lord. What you have here is a courtroom scene. And the prosecutor or judge says, I got something against you. The mountains, the things that were built long before, they'll be the jurors. But he says, I've lost it. Verse 3, what have I done to you? That's what God is asking the people. What have I done to you? And why is this important? Because if God has kept his part of the deal, if God has done everything that he said, everything that he promised, you're guilty. Without a doubt, there's no way you can wiggle, no word you can give. Now, if you can find where God dropped the ball, where he made a promise and that didn't come true, you got him. That's all it takes to break the contract. All it takes. But it didn't happen. And even though this is thousands of years later, who would have forgotten the story of the plagues in Egypt? Who possibly could have forgotten what it meant for those people after more than 400 years to be brought up out of Egypt to the promised land? I don't see how anybody could have forgotten it. God says, that's what I've done for you. And then he goes to Balaam and Balak. And that's like, in my terms, that's a head scratcher. It's a good example. It just seems to be strange. It's not one we talk about a whole lot. But if you think back hard, as the people, before they were entering the promised land, they had tried to go through the land of the Amorites. And the Amorites said no. That did not work out well for the people of Ammon. Not at all. So now they come into the land of the Moabites. And they want to come through the land of the Moabites. Not going to disturb anything. We just got a path. We've got to go. Balak, the king of the Moabites, he has seen or heard what just happened to the Amorites. I cannot stop these people. It's clear that God is on their side. But I got an idea. I'm going to get this guy called Balaam to come and curse them. That'll fix it. That'll take care of it. Balaam will curse them. Do you remember Balaam? I think he's the only guy mentioned in the Bible with a talking donkey. He did not want to go to Balak, but God finally let him go on, and his job was to curse the Israelites, curse them. And he wiggled and he squirmed and he tried, but before he was finished, after about the third try, he ended up blessing the people of Israel with God's words. Told to curse them, paid to curse them, and he ends up blessing the people. And yes, The people went through Moab, and yes, they got to the promised land. That was God's plan all along. And some king named Balak was not going to stop them. And some guy called Balaam was not going to curse them. God has kept his promise. So now, Israel, Judah, tell me where you stand. Comments? Continuing, verses 6 to 8. With what shall I come before the Lord and bow myself before the high God? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He has shown you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to justify, to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Rivers of oil? 10,000 rivers of oil? Thousands of rams? How many sacrifices does it take to clean this mess up? That's what they're asking. But they've gone beyond that. That's not going to fix things. The reference about giving my firstborn, that was having your children pass through fire. That was a known way that the gods of the Amorites were pleased. You sacrificed, you burnt your son or daughter. Moabites did some of that too. Is that good enough to make God happy? If you can't answer that question, go back and read Deuteronomy and see what love God places on life. God's expecting more. He wants a change of heart. This is not go up and sacrifice and tomorrow go back to the same old stuff. You've gotten nowhere. You didn't learn anything. How can that be pleasing to God? He wants them, or us, to change your heart. And the sad fact, what he is asking, they already knew. They already knew what they needed to do. Pat. Can't repeat everything that Pat said. I hope you heard him. But we're to do the best we can until we die, is how he finished. The best we can. Micah 6:9. The Lord's voice cries to the city, wisdom shall see your name. Hear the rod who has appointed it. No doubt what this is talking about. The rod is the punisher. And here are just a few of the sins. Micah 6:10 and 11. And there yet the treasures of the wickedness in the house of the wicked, and the short measure that is an abomination. Shall I count pure those with wicked scales, and with a bag of deceitful weights? I'm not sure that we can really relate to how bad this was. We don't think about scales and weights a whole lot. But for a country, a time that was built on agriculture, weight meant everything. And when you talk about the different things, when you talk about shekels, and even when you're talking about the talents that were given in the New Testament, that was all about weight. It was pounds or whatever. It was weight. So if you corrupt that, you've corrupted everything. What this is talking about are cheats. Simply put, it's cheats. And do you think it doesn't happen today? Now, probably nobody in here is crazy as I am, but back when we were in Georgia 30 years ago, and I'm standing there pumping my gas, I'm looking at the gas pump. It's got neat information like how octane is calculated and all that. But you know what it also has? It has a stamp from the Department of Agriculture, and it says when this pump was inspected. Why? So that when you come there and you pay whatever price you pay for a gallon of gas, you actually get a gallon of gas. Surprise, surprise. Even today, weights and measures are still a big deal to us. And there are still people that will cheat. Again, I go back to the news. Type in Minnesota and fraud. Those people are cheating us. They were taking money that was supposed to be for the needy, money that we and every other citizen in the country paid in taxes, and it was all abused. It's all about people who cheat. What some people will do in the next several months on their taxes that they don't want to pay what is their fair share. They cheat.
When you're at the gas pump, you need to look and see that it says U.S. Imperial gallon. I say that because I was at the racetrack on the outskirts of Tony down there in Chattanooga, and I noticed their pump said vintage gallon. Well, I don't know what a vintage gallon is, but I went in and challenged them on it. They couldn't respond. My point being, you may not have got a 3/4 of a gallon or 7/8 of a gallon. A vintage gallon may have been, you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Not. And the next time I was down there, well, within a year or so, it now says U.S. Imperial gallon.
Here's Stephen, how the scale had changed.
Yeah, a cheap, oh, this is only $2.20 a gallon or whatever. But pay attention, folks, because they will cheat you. Anyway, sorry.
No, that's fine. I brought it up. All right, so let's finish up in verse 12. For her rich men are full of violence, and her inhabitants have spoken lies, and their tongue is deceitful in their mouth. We're talking about violent people. We are talking about liars. We're just about out of time, so let me give you just a little bit to think about. How bad was this? Well, there was a young lawyer who came to Christ and said, "What is the greatest commandment?" Christ said, "Okay." And he said, "Love the Lord your God." Christ said, "Yep, got it right." But there is a second, is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. If you are a violent person and you are a liar, Jew, can you love your neighbor as yourself? Are you loving your neighbor as yourself, Mr. Jew, under the Mosaic law? Oh, but you think I'm going to let us wiggle out of that one because I kept saying Jew, Jew, Jew? Galatians 5:22-23. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such, there is no law. Thank you for your attention.